The Chicago Bar Association was created back in 1874 as just a general resource to help attorneys network with each other and be successful in their practices. The CBA chose to set up the insurance subsidiary because a lot of the members were asking questions about what types of insurance they should tap into. Who's the best resource for legal malpractice insurance, life insurance, health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. And rather than sending those elsewhere, we figured we'd be a better resource if we just kept it all in-house and they had a familiar face to work with on a regular basis. And we think that it's very important to get the word out and let our members know that we're around to help as a resource. On top of that, we can work with any law firm or any attorney in the United States. When a law firm comes to us for a second opinion on their legal malpractice insurance policy, we're usually able to find them a lower price for the same coverage or better coverage, or in some instances, actually both. We can find a lower price for better coverage, which is obviously the end goal. Insurance is something that not a lot of people know the ins and outs of it, and maybe a smaller firm or a solo attorney needs that consultant to really keep them in line or to provide information to take it off of their plate. They have enough going on dealing with clients, collecting bills, doing everything that makes them successful in their profession. What I'm here to do is to be a resource and really to just provide assistance in something that they are not inherently an expert in.
Welcome to You and the Law, a Chicago Bar Association production that explores matters of law and policy for the general public. We do substantive legal topics as well as policy, even more broadly. Sometimes we get into the culture of the law and some of the things that inform, the practice and just the ethics and sort of ideas that we bring to the practice. And this is going to be the second in what's sort of an emerging series of programs on the intersections of art, law, and social justice. And it's kind of a big topic that's wide open, and I think we can have a lot of fun with it, but we're definitely going to be returning to some themes that I think emerge naturally during the course of these conversations. So we do have with us three wonderful guests, and rather than me introducing them, I'm going to actually turn it over to them to give you a little bit of background about themselves, in their careers, but also in terms of their arts and how, and in terms of the arts and how their connection with that informs, their sense of justice. And Jennifer here is not a lawyer, but she's very involved with lawyers and very involved with music. So we've got a lot of intersecting sort of energy here. So with that, actually, Jennifer, as our non-lawyer, why don't we start with you, and you can get us rolling, because we do hope that a lot of our viewing, our audience, our general public, because that's kind of who this is tailored to. So go ahead.
Yeah, I would be happy to. So my name is Jennifer Huang. Like Michael said, I'm actually an artist who has connections with lawyers. And that connection is that I am the conductor of the Chicago Bar Association Symphony Orchestra, which is an amazing group that's nearly 40 years old. This is actually my first season with them. So I am brand new in this role, but I've had the privilege of doing 3 concerts now with them, and we're working on our 4th together. And it is really a fantastic group. And as a conductor, I've also had the privilege of working with other orchestras around Chicago, including the Northwestern Medical Orchestra. So I also work with a lot of medical professionals. And it's just given me a really interesting insight on the intersection of music, art, and these other non-musical professions.
For sure, and the fact that you have doctors wrapped up into it too is sort of a whole nother element. If we get past the big ideas and we can drill into nuances, I'm sort of interested to hear your take on who the better musicians are, doctors and lawyers. Not really so much that, but more just so what the sort of differences in the field is, if anything, and maybe there's not. Conrad, why
I
don't
have
we go to?
lots of it.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Jennifer. What'd you say there?
No, no, it's just it's a great perspective to have, having my kind of legs in both camps. But yeah.
Yeah, and I do medical, and actually Conrad does too, medical malpractice. So
Uh,
there are other elements there that we could have fun with. But anyway, Conrad, why don't we go to you? Can share a little bit about your practice and also being a plaintiff's lawyer, which welcome, by the way.
Uh, well, thanks, Mike. Conrad Nowak here. I'm a partner at Corboy and Demetrio. I came over to Corboy and Demetrio last year. It's been just over a 1 year anniversary after spending 18 and a half years doing a variety of different defense work over at Hinshaw and Culbertson, and that transition has been wonderful. I'm where I should be in life and in my career. With respect to music, though, Mike, you and I go way back. I've been a guitar player, songwriter, boy, since I was about maybe 14 or 15 years old. And not to jump the gun, but the closest thing that I have to what Jennifer and Kenny have, being what I call formally trained proper musicians, is my mother went to conservatory. My family's from Poland. Although I was born here, my mother was educated in Warsaw, went to music school there, and was a pianist. So my childhood memories have Chopin in the background and her teaching music. Da, 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 and scales and scales and practice and practice. And all I knew is I love music, but I don't want to ever do that. And so naturally gravitated to guitar, electric guitar, punk rock, and a variety of different genres, and played in a variety of different groups that performed throughout the Chicago area, and in a few other places. And that has been kind of a constant. Music and the guitar has been a constant for me through my life, in good times and bad. And I'm sure we'll get to that. But that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, too, the combination of the elegant sophistication of high-level classical music and gritty rock and roll is you. So I think that fairly represents you. I also think, for what it's worth, that's a good dynamic for the plaintiff's lawyer in general, but that's more kind of a joke. Anyway, Kenny, go ahead. Let's hear from you.
Sure thing. So my name is Kenny Matuszewski. I'm a patent litigator at a firm called Rozier, Hardt, McDonough. I've been doing patent litigation for about 8 years now. In addition to, I focus a lot of my practice on a lot of software, medical devices, a lot of sort of like computers and electronics technologies. So I do a lot on the plaintiff side, but I do a mix of some defense side patent work. So the reason why I got into that was because I was always very curious about how, the world works. I wanted to kind of know how things worked. I wanted to see like, oh, it's like so fascinating learning just about how things interconnect, how each small little piece like kind of plays into itself. And in many ways, I think that's probably what sort of drew me as well to the arts, particularly musical arts. So I actually played tuba in the Chicago Bar Association Symphony Orchestra under Jennifer's direction. I also play euphonium, particularly with the Barristers Big Band, which we've played many sets at jazz clubs around Chicagoland. We've played at opera halls. We've done all, like, we've even played at the CSO before. It's something where I started off with brass, and I guess unlike many, so I would say, apart from maybe piano lessons or like the in classroom time of band, I never really had formal training, but it was something that I really liked. It was something where you're really coming together to be bigger than yourself. Like you're there to really just kind of come together, create a good sound. More importantly, at the higher levels, there's a lot of analytical stuff that goes into it, just really in terms of just whether it's like counting, just figuring out, okay, does this make sense? Like, is this arrangement good? Just getting the nitty gritty is something that I really think works very well. And which is, it's very different to compare to what I do as a lawyer, which especially with when you're in advocacy and a lot of times litigating, like, you're doing a certain position, you're going up against somebody. But here with the music, you're really doing something collaborative and you're coming together as a whole to really create something beautiful, reinterpret or reimagine someone's vision and just really get their message across. I'm also the current chair of the Young Lawyer section of the Chicago Bar Association. So there's always plenty to do, and and the funny thing is when Jennifer mentioned the orchestra is almost 40 years old, I realized I'm actually younger than the orchestra. So it's good to know that it's been around in such an institution even now.
Yeah, so almost 40 years. What are there, like something like 70, 80 musicians involved in the orchestra? I don't know the numbers, but that's what I read recently. Let's hear a little bit more about the history since this is a Chicago bar show. Let's spend a little time on the Chicago Bar Association Symphony Orchestra and other um productions, because the CBA does a variety of productions that kind of fit into the its overall mission, and to the extent that we can kind of like why are those there? Why have those? What do those do for the CBA? I mean, I think I know why. I think there are good reasons, but like why have that part of it? Kenny hit on some of it, but Jennifer, why don't you share from an sort of outsider, non-lawyer perspective? What do you see that it brings to the profession?
Oh my goodness, so much. I think that a group like this serves like it is the definition of serving the community. In the broad sense, we put concerts on, and these concerts bring in audience who are very connected to people in the lawyer field. And what I really love is it's audience that may not be regular patrons of classical music. So these are not people who perhaps regularly follow, the professional groups of Chicago. And this might be their, one of the only times that they see live music or see live classical music. And as a professional musician, I love that. I love bringing new people into the audience. Something that you and Conrad touched on earlier, which is, this idea, which is not incorrect, but this idea that classical music is so elegant and refined, compared to something like grungy rock. I think that there's a lot of truth in that, but also, you know, it can be something that closes the genre
Mm.
to a lot of people and make certain people feel, oh, this is not for me, not because I don't enjoy it, but because it's a closed door for me.
Sure.
And so, in this capacity, getting to show people that like classical music is for everyone, and it can be raunchy, it can be grungy, it can be weird. It's not like hoity-toity. The concert hall is almost a sacred religious space. No one can cough, no one can clap between movements. It's kind of like, let's like split the curtains aside a little bit and let people in and enjoy what we do.
Right.
Um, so that's one element of it, but to me, one of the greatest services that an orchestra like this does is to the people who are playing in the orchestra themselves. The people who we have law students, we have legal professionals in all these fields. And I mean, I can just imagine them coming to rehearsal after a long day of work and a long day of draining things, reading, writing, just constantly like that kind of mental energy. I mean, we're not just talking about like an emotional outlet, a creative outlet, something where you are refining your skills, something where you are getting kind of a emotional catharsis, which is so core for music. But something that Kenny was saying earlier is like you show up and you have to count your rests. Like the tuba sometimes doesn't play for like 75 measures, and he better be sitting there
Yep.
focusing on counting. And this is something I didn't realize until some of the medical professionals I work with tell me is like one of the reasons why I love going to rehearsal is because it's like meditation. Like I cannot lose focus for a minute because I can't tell if 103 bars of rest have gone by or 105 bars. And then I'm humiliated because I crashed the cymbal at the wrong time. So much is at stake. They have to stay focused, and they cannot let their minds go back to work or let their minds go back to the office and like think about the problems that plague them there. It's like you focus, and that's the only thing that you can do. So something that like that I think is so unique. I cannot think of another community or service or thing that can provide that kind of relief or not distraction, but like meditative concentration, to the members. And it can only make people better at whatever they do. It can only make people better lawyers having this outlet. It can only make people better professionals in general. So yeah, long-winded, but I
No,
really
but
think that's
there's a lot there. And actually the challenge I have in following up there is kind of pick, kind of judiciously from that, because there are a bunch of little threads there to pick from. But I'm gonna grab one and kind of tie it back into something Conrad mentioned earlier, which, without getting into detail, I sent him a tune this morning that I was working on. It was to get my head straight. So the therapeutic value, right, and engaging and having that catharsis, and I think on a personal level, especially as there's a lot of attention these days, more so than in the past, although it's been building, to mental health in the profession. And this is a pretty good way to get some relief and some clarity and kind of reset the deck after what hopefully, hopefully whatever. I mean, lawyers voluntarily undertake things that are highly stressful. I mean, many people do, right? Many people do. And there are people on the side of this building cleaning it. You know what I mean? That's more stressful than what I do in here, probably. But like, you need that stuff. And when, especially lawyers, when we don't get that meditative stuff all the time in our practice, because our practice, especially if you're in litigation, this is my own particular take, people can disagree. Um, but you actually kind of get rewarded for having a little bit of anxiety and paranoia, because you need to kind of exercise that as a lawyer on your cases, see where it's strong, where it's weak, always be second guessing. And that is not a flow state. The flow state is when you get into something, we can describe, everyone has their kind of ways to get there, but certainly music and the meditative aspect of it and the focus, which is not inherently relaxing when you think about it. But when you get into it and are actually doing it and not thinking, that is where it's at, for sure, I think. Right. For sure, I think is my quote for the day. For sure, I think. But Conrad, because you kind of touched on that a little bit earlier in terms of the manner in which music is integrated in your life, serving multiple purposes, including just its, good, bad, whatever the vibe is, the guitar is going to be there for you to get you to the next spot, right?
Oh, 150%. And, and I think this, Mike, it is an expression of our soul, of the inner emotion, whatever instrument it is you're playing as a musician. It comes from a variety of different places, and the best of it sometimes comes when it's not from our mind, it's from our heart, right? We find that our fingers are playing by themselves. The music is just kind of coming out. And when you're tying it, and I know you do a lot of this. You're an incredible songwriter, Mike, and I think that's the other thing, that what music does when we tie it to social justice, it is a voice for so many different types of issues. If we look through our history here, in the United States, and all over, how so frequently it's the musicians, it's the artists that push forward a message for change, and I think that's something that always spoke to me. I'm blessed. My mom was an incredible person, and to tie off that point about her, when I chose to play electric guitar, when I chose not to want to take lessons, and to be clear, when I said I knew I didn't want to do classical music, it was simply because of discipline. I just didn't have the discipline to practice in the way that you had to be accomplished in that. But what drew me to music was how all these artists, and I use punk rock or reggae as an example. If you listen to the words, a lot of people just hear loud guitars and they hear this, kind of chill vibe with reggae. But if you listen to the words every time, they're screaming for social justice. They're screaming for those that don't have a voice. Some of my favorite bands, like the Clash, or Bob Marley and others, they were screaming for change. Um, and I find that ties in a lot to what I do now as a plaintiff's lawyer. Right, I am doing that every day in a way. I'm not writing a song about it, but what drew me to that type of music, is what kind of fulfills another part of my heart right now as a lawyer.
Yeah, totally. And I will tell you this, and I don't think it's cheesy at all. In fact, I changed my LinkedIn heading to it, not feeling at all weird about it, which is, what do we do as plaintiffs attorneys? We're advocates for the value of human life and the quality of human life, period. That's really where it's at. And, we don't want to get, too focused on our cases representing, value of life exactly, but they're certainly informed by that, and we're doing that to protect it. And the rule of law, of course, as an entire conception, is about improving the quality of life, and we can make it sophisticated, or we can be real about it, right? I mean, and real is sophisticated, but we don't want to intellectualize it all the time, because it's it may be a learned profession in a sense, but it's about what's happening on the street for real, so and I think that's certainly embedded in the practice. So I want to mention two things, and I don't want to do too much more talking. I want to hear you guys talk, but I do want to mention a couple things you picked up on, or I picked up on there. One is there's a mom connection, which I'll tell you this, because I was going to hesitate to not, I would not talk about my mom, but now I'm going to. My mom played piano, and that was my introduction to it. Um, and she actually got me lessons, which of course I did not like, because I wanted to play. And I don't want to get into theory versus practice. There's, or versus actually playing. There's a lot there that's fun to talk about. We don't have to get too far with that, but for sure, I wanted to experience the music and not pieces of paper, put it that way. So, but my mom turned me on to that, but she was a big blues fan. So she was into classical, but she took all, when I was starting to play guitar, and it is grunge, because that is the era, and that was what was on the radio, and actually it's still music that I love. Um, well, I was trying to get her to appreciate it, because she was more of, her generation blues and kind of classic rock, of course, but especially blues. Um, you know, she she would give me blues CDs and say, take, I don't want to hear you trying to play this Nirvana Pearl Jam song, whatever it is. Even though I think they're great bands, and she eventually came around, she's like, listen to this Buddy Guy, learn how to play like Eric Clapton. You can turn it up as loud as you want. And it actually served me well. And eventually I was able to articulate for her the connection between that music and the music I was trying to like share with her. So there's that. And also going back to the culture, and then I'll kind of pass it on to you guys. Probably a couple months ago, like the law kind of responds to culture. Lawyers don't necessarily move the culture. We like to think we do, but I don't think we do so much. I think we respond to it. And it's not that we don't move it, but I think the culture comes from more sort of basic places than the profession. Um, and I think that I was at the Rainbow Push over at um, uh, U of C. I think that's what it was. And I forgot, because I've been to a bunch of these things recently. But at all these social justice events, they've got stages, they've got theater worked in, they have music, they have performances, they have humanities, and they have culture. Is what I really think they're getting at. So I think the music is really, it speaks to things that don't necessarily kind of come fully into the practice, like before they're there. There's the culture, there's the feeling, there's the vibe, there's what's happening with people. And I think the music brings a lot of that, frankly. So, and I think that's why we see it embedded in so much of the social movements specifically.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just kind of wanted to tie. I mean, this has all been absolutely fantastic. Something which I think a lot of people touch on, which I think is great. I think something I've really interwoven is that, I mean, there's many aspects, I think, with the discussion of justice and music, where I know we've kind of first talked about lyrics. I mean, where I myself can remember I was, very much, I was a teenager, like young adult, like very much like 10 and 12 years old when a lot of like the Iraq War was coming out, and there would be like the concept of the protest album. Like I remember like listening to Green Day's American Idiot, like really kind of learning more about this was something like this was going on in the world. This was important to know about and everything. So in some ways it provided an awakening for me, like just to think more critically about the world, like understand like what's going on and everything. So, which I found was important. But we also have like just even the relevance of music itself. Like we have, say, for example, even the classical realm, we've had many pieces that spoke a lot about the conditions of their day. I mean, people have responded in all sorts of reactions and everything.
Right.
We even had regarding even just relevance, I think of, for example, I went to the Nutcracker last year. This is the very first time I did it. I'd seen a lot online with like, oh, very traditional ways of doing it, where it was updated last year to like the Chicago's World Fair and everything, and
Right.
also added some other aspects, which at the time, like there were certain aren't there at least at the time of the play, like that as in the modern day, like there's a lot of negative depictions that weren't okay then. There were okay now. Like they were able to recontextualize it with this more modern telling of the Nutcracker and do it to a much more respectful way with a lot of these cultures, like in many ways throughout the show and everything. But most importantly, I was even thinking we have access a lot of the times. So something I've been seeing a lot now, and Jennifer, I think you could probably agree, like we're reaching a lot like with music. It's something like with so many people. Like you're getting a lot now with whether it's like classical, like it's not as stuffy anymore. You see like people like, okay, you can wear like dress down as much. Like there's not as much shushing. You have I think about there's a lot of, especially now here in Chicago, when you have a lot of school tours, like say for example, here's what opera is like in English, or like we're gonna tell you a little bit more about what this is, like why this matters, or even just say for example, providing like recordings of say for like even live streams of bands, like which I know like they use this was kind of in COVID, but I mean I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of nice now for certain shows. I mean, I know like with Allpalooza, like where they live stream it, it's like, we're busy and frankly, it's crowded and hot. It's like, but I mean, I even when I went to Andrew Bird on Tuesday over the First Presbyterian, like they're doing like one of the nights at this residency here in Chicago for the week. That's a live stream of it, which, if you can't make it or if you live somewhere else, you're still able to see it, at least in some capacity. So there's
Right.
ways in which that access, I think, in terms of how we think of music, whether it's just the content of itself, how people are able to understand it and kind of come to it, I think is important. And
Sure.
that's something.
I think opening up that way is important. And speaking of opening up, we're gonna have to close it down because we're a little tight on time. And
Oh, geez.
yeah, because we're moving right through. But I want to share this. And I really wasn't going to do it, but you did mention a protest album, and I'm doing it for the cause, not for. But this is I have one, and it just came out, and it's called Blues for Palestine. And it is a social justice album, and it's a concept album, and I won't spend more time on it, but I did want to share it because, and it's got the scales of justice on it. So it's that's the culture in my opinion. We'll get to the law and we get to those things, but the feelings where it starts. And let's see if we got much more time left. I think we're right at the end here. So we'll have to have you all back because that went really fast, and I really appreciate it. And with that, thank you everyone for
Yeah.
tuning into this episode of You and the Law, and thank you to our wonderful guests for being here.
Thank you. Can I make
Thank
one
you
quick
so
plug really
much.
quickly?
Yes, sir. Do it.
So basically, the Chicago Bar Association
Super
Symphony
quick, or else
Orchestra.
it's not going to make it on. Super quick.
Yeah, so our next concert is Saturday, March 1st at St. James Cathedral on Huron at 7:30. We have a chamber concert at Piano Forte on January 26th. That's a Sunday, 3 p.m. And our big band is having a performance at Andy's Jazz Club on December 30th, 6 and 8:15 p.m. You're welcome to come at any or all of these. We hope to see you there.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you.